Raj Chandra Bose's close involvement in the development of statistics in India and the United States and in the modern growth of combinatorial mathematics resulted in his coming into contact with many prominent contributors to the two fields. These included not only people who worked on the theoretical foundations of the subject, but also many others who were masters of its applications in science, industry, and government, and who recognized and promoted new important statistical problems. This final program, devoted to Professor Bose's career, includes recollections of some of his famous associates and discussions of his views and experiences that contribute to his philosophy of the important qualities of a good teacher and scientist.
The role of a faculty member in the modern university is conventionally cited as teaching, research, and service. The service customarily is a matter of being a consultant to some agency of society. You've had your share of that. Would you tell us about this and something of your view of how it should work?
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite places was the National Bureau of Standards.
Yes.
I helped them prepare designs of the type 2 to the power n, 3 to the power n. They have tables
mm-hmm.
and some asymmetric design. I also wrote 2 papers jointly with Cameron, which calibrated weights.
Yes.
For weight calibration. And I helped them various other things. Usually I used to go out in Christmas vacations and some days during the summer vacation. 2 summers I spent about 6 weeks with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Some of my students were employed there,
yes.
like Clatworthy and Connor, John Rao, who is now Joan Rosenblatt,
yes.
and Marvin Zeland.
Yes.
This group is dispersed now. They have left
Yep, sure.
and gone to various other places. But at that time, it was like a home to me.
Yeah, sure.
Now, this is one kind of service, very well-posed problems,
Mm-hmm.
because Uden was the leader of the group. He was one of the best statisticians,
Mm-hmm.
and Eisenhower was there.
Yeah.
Another kind of service problem is where the one who asks the question is himself not a statistician
Yes.
and cannot pose the question well.
Right.
The first duty of a service statistician is then to find out what he exactly wants
Yeah.
before at all
Yeah.
any answer can be
Yeah.
given. Normally, the ideal situation would be that if a man wants the answer to a certain question, he should first consult a statistician. Then arises the problem from design of experiments. We will tell him how to collect his data.
Mm-hmm.
And once this data is collected in the best possible manner, then it is analyzed and his question is answered.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, this happens very rarely. They collect the data themselves,
Yeah.
haphazardly, and then throw it at us.
True.
You please analyze it
Yes.
and give us the answer to the following questions.
Yeah. That's
I
true.
remember one example, the Aberdeen Proving Grounds.
Mm-hmm.
They had a number of rooms, they had various equipments. The officers used to be rotated for retraining.
Mm-hmm.
in their various duties, and they wanted to use the rooms, the time, the equipment in the optimum possible manner.
Aha.
And they had reams of data.
Yes.
The main consultant was Dr. Nicholson, my chairman,
Mm-hmm.
but he associated me and one economics professor and Ray Chaudhary, who was associated me in these BCH codes,
Yeah.
and Dana Quaid.
Uh-huh.
We went there a number of times, and with great difficulty, I got out of them what they really wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And then we could express it as what would now be called a linear programming problem, optimization.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And Dana Quaid did the computations for us.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very pleased. Ultimately, we got a good answer.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
Another thing I remember is there was a mill called Haynes Mill.
Yes.
Here also the principal investigator was Nicholson,
Yeah.
but he took me along.
Uh-huh.
I found that the main difficulty in what they wanted was they manufacture socks, and they wanted to optimize with respect to two characters
Mm-hmm.
simultaneously.
Yes.
Now the optimum point for one character was one thing, 1 point,
Sure.
and the optimum point for the another character was another thing.
Yes.
And I explained to them that, look, first we will have to draw contours about the optimum point. For example, 100 is the value of the most excellent point for the character A, and 80 is the value of the optimum point for the for the character B.
Mm-hmm.
Then let us do contours. The contour for 100 is this point, then the contour for 90, contour for 80, contour for 70, and
Yeah.
so on. And similarly, the contours for the B.
Yeah.
Where these contours touched, we will get a line, a sort of curve.
Yep.
And on this curve, to find the optimum point, they have to tell me how to trade between the character A and the character B. That is, set up a cost function in
Yes.
the language of statistics.
Of course.
Once they had set up the cost function, we were able to satisfy them.
Very good. Well, these are interesting examples indeed, and this is what happens so often.
This is what happens
Yeah.
in service.
Well, R.C., you have been a giant in statistical research and mathematics. You've grown up scientifically in the company of other great men. P.C. Mahalanobis, Harold Hotelling, Ronald Fisher, Jersey Neyman, Abraham Wald. Tell us something of interrelationships with people like that.
Well, I didn't do any joint work with most of these people, except with Mahalanobis. May I tell you some stories?
I think that's always a good thing.
At the international conference in Japan,
Yes.
all of us were present, and there was some trouble at the Indian Statistical Institute. Some workers had struck. Mahalanobis had to go back there. At the final banquet, the Crown Prince of Japan was in the center of the head table.
Yes.
Fisher on his right hand, Mahalanobis on his left hand. Before the Crown Prince's speech and the last course, the time for Mahalanobis to go and take his plane came.
Mm.
And he excused himself to the prince and just left the dinner. Next day, Fisher asked me, Bose, why did Mahalanobis leave his dinner so dramatically? I said, sir, there is some trouble in the institute. There is a strike. He said, yes, there is some trouble. If there were no trouble, he would make trouble to live dramatically. With Wald, I can tell you this. He was, of course, a very brilliant man. Anything I showed him, whether it was his subject or not, he would at once understand it. But the very first day, we were discussing a problem, and there came time 5. He said, Bose, I must leave now. I said, why? Let us finish this. This problem will be finished in 5 more minutes. He said, no, my wife will be angry with me. I have to put my daughter to bed. I said, isn't your wife going to do it? Bose, it is not Romania. It is not he was from Romania.
Yeah.
Bose, it is not Romania. It is not India. It is the United States. My wife is American.
Cultural sensitivity.
Yes.
Very good.
I was visiting professor at Berkeley in 1948 summer. I was not used to drinking any liquor or even wine those days.
Yes.
Wald was also at that time a visiting professor. Lowell was a visiting professor. Newman liked to take us out to dinner. He took us out to dinner, and the waiter would ask, what will you drink, sir? What will you drink, sir? So on. When it came my turn, Newman will always explain to him, Professor Bose always takes the strongest possible whiskey. Then I would have to explain to the waiter that no, it's not so, just give me a glass of water.
He had his eye on you.
Yes. No. About others.
Well, he was a very good friend of yours, was he not?
Yes.
Who, Paul Erdős?
Paul Erdős
Yes.
was a very good friend of mine. His peculiarity is this. Whenever he has a friend of a nationality different from Hungarian, he will ask, what is the word for master? What is the word for slave? So I said, in my language, Bengali, Prabhu is the word for master, and Britto is the word for slave. So whenever he writes to me, he writes, give my regards to Prabhu.
Oh.
My wife is the Prabhu, and I am the Britto.
Perceptive man.
When he comes here, he stays with us, and my wife knows what he likes. So he would get up at 4 o'clock, all of us would be asleep.
4 o'clock?
4 o'clock,
Yes.
take a shower and be ready, read the refrigerator, take his breakfast. Then when we come down for breakfast at 7 or 7:30, he will again sit for coffee with us, but he would work from 4 to 7, and as soon as he finished his breakfast, he will again go to work. I estimate that he works 12 or 14 hours every day. And I said, Professor Erdős, why do you work so hard? He says, Bose, there will be enough time for rest when I am in the grave.
Oh, dear. You were telling me something also about contact with Alfred Régnier.
Yes. When he came as a visiting professor to Chapel Hill in 1968, and he gave me a conjecture about a graph theoretic problem by one of his friends. And I knew from my work on strongly regular design that the conjecture was wrong. And I at once gave him a few examples that, look, these are examples where the conjecture is wrong. Then he said, it's very interesting. You write some papers on. This is the friendship problem. Called friendship graphs now.
I see.
The friendship graphs are graphs which are regular graphs, but any two vertices which are adjacent or not, they are always simultaneously adjacent to d different vertices. So if vertices corresponding to friends we join by an edge in a graph, then this will be the graph of a kind which is strongly regular and in which the parameters p sub 1, 1, super 1 and p sub 2, 2, super 1, which I explained already, would be equal. And Srikhande and I investigated this problem and constructed these graphs.
Wonderful.
Also, when I went to Hungary, he invited me to Hungary to give some lectures. The first day he came to receive us, they had already taken their dinner, but they sat down with us in the hotel. And I was very much surprised when they took this strong whiskey and drank them at one gulp.
Oh, sure. Oh, yes.
We took a long time, I and my wife, to sip the 2 glasses.
What about interplay with colleagues like your very good friends, S.N. Roy and Adriano Barlatti?
Barlatti, of course, was my best friend. We invited him as a visiting professor in 1964 because I was interested in projective planes at that time, and Barlatti is one of the authorities in projective planes. Now, one story I can tell you about him. His son was 11 years old, Marco, and he picked up English very quickly. In school, he said to Barlatti, "These gentlemen whom you lecture on projective planes must be very intelligent." Barlatti said, "Yes, they are intelligent. I know they are intelligent." He said, "Yes, you speak such bad English and still they understand you."
Very good. Yeah.
Of course, I wrote a couple of papers with Barlatti on projective planes. I was interested in representation of projective planes. That is, there is a n space, finite space, and call something pseudo points, call some of the spaces pseudo points, and some of the spaces pseudo lines. And call something, some relation between these pseudo points and pseudo lines, incidence. Then if the actions of the projective planes are satisfied, then this is a projective plane.
I see. Very good. Very good.
And I and Barlatti produced such planes. And we continued this work when Barlatti was visiting professor here at CSU.
And of course you worked with S.N. Roy for years and years, beginning in India, right?
For S.N. Roy, I worked for 15 years in India and for 15 years here. And I can't relate all the papers I wrote jointly with S.N. Roy. There are just too many of them, too much.
But in your...
work. But S.N. Roy was a very interesting man. He was a humorist. He would make out some story about me, a completely false story, and relate it to the class. You know, Professor Bose did this and this. When Professor Bose first came to the United States, he saw boys and girls going out hand in hand. He thought, oh, what a nice country the United States is. All brothers and sisters go out hand in hand.
A good man to have for a friend, indeed. Greg, one of the joys of teaching is watching the progress of students whose nurture you've had a hand in. You have an extraordinary reputation for bringing along even the modestly talented. What has your philosophy been here, and what's your view of how it's worked out?
Well, it has worked out very well. My philosophy with students who do research with me is to lay bare my processes of thought. I don't hide my processes of thought and come out with the answer and tell them that, look, you should do it in this way.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of talk to myself, now let us see how can we do this, and so on, and let him be with me, and then see, talking to myself, I gradually discover that yes, this seems to be a plausible way of answering this problem, and let him see how I am thinking.
Wonderful.
Of course, I have the good luck to have some very brilliant students. For example, when Rao was the student, he was my first student. The University of Calcutta started the Department of Statistics, as I said to you, in 1942, and Rao was in the first group. I used to tell my wife that this student is so good that he will become an FRS someday. Mm-hmm. And my prophecy came out all right.
Very good. Very good.
When I went as a visiting professor to England, Vishal told me, we have trained many good Indian students. I said, who? He said, C.R. Rao. I told him that he was already well trained.
Yes, before he got there.
Before he ever got here.
Very good.
But because he had to get a British degree, because all our thing was done during British times. British rules were very, very well established.
Yes, sure.
So he had to get a British degree.
Yep. Bose, looking back over your entire career, how would you proceed differently if you had to do all over?
Well, one has to do according to one's circumstances.
Uh-huh.
But if, for example, my father was rich enough and I was of the proper age at that time, I consider my education in India to be poor. Mm. I would have gone to Germany, to Göttingen especially, and learned at the feet of Hilbert and Noether and Klein. Mm-hmm. If it were possible. Of course, that was not possible at all. So I wrote my thesis in 1947, which the university allowed me to proceed directly to D.Lit, and came here as a visiting professor at that time.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
7.5 months later, I came in a full-time capacity.
Well, you did a great deal, though, without that good kind of education. You think that in your 20s it would have been better somehow? Is that your advice to youth today? Do it in your 20s?
No, my advice would be learn as much mathematics as possible in your 20s.
Okay.
At least the mathematics appertaining to that particular science. For example, for the science of statistics now, the students must know analysis and must know matrix theory and linear algebra quite well. They shouldn't think of coming to statistics if they don't know these things.
Yes, yes. Finally, what do you see as the future directions for statistical theory and practice?
I think there is going to be an information explosion. And therefore it would be good for statisticians to get into it at this time. On computers, especially the theory of computers, how to produce good computers, and how to miniaturize them and things like that, use their statistics for this purpose.
Mm-hmm. Do you think data analysis is the way of the future?
Yes, data analysis, but done in the proper way.
Yeah.
Firstly, the data should be collected according to the best principles of design of experiments.
Mm-hmm.
And then this data should be analyzed, not in a haphazard way.
True. Do you think that decision theory may yet replace testing of hypotheses in the classical sense?
Maybe,
It takes a new world, maybe.
yes, takes a new world.
Well,
There is a story regarding this too. Wald knew that his decision theory was not being used. The last day before he went to India, I and Roy were with him in his summer home near Princeton. And he told us that after I come back from India, I would make you both professors in the Columbia University. We'll call you from Chapel Hill. And you help me with the examples, how decision theory should be used.
I see.
The history of statistics might have been changed if this would have been. But he somehow had some premonition for plane travel. I told him that plane travel in big planes is practically safe, is very safe. But don't ride these itty-bitty planes in India. Somehow or other in going to Travancore he was delayed. Professor Malanavis delayed him. And both Wald and Mrs. Wald perished on this plane which struck a peak in the Nilgiris in southern India.
Yeah. Great tragedy.
A small plane, a great tragedy.
Yeah. Well, Raj Chandra, thank you very much for this conversation on your life and times, and for a view of what makes a great statistician, mathematician tick. 10 years ago, the book, a encyclopedia of combinatorial theory, was published as Festschrift in your honor on the occasion of your 70th birthday. Maybe we can consider this interview a kind of Festsprache in your honor for your 80th birthday.
Thank you.